This was a terrible obsession in my life. Why was I losing my hair? And suddenly my hand lashed out and hit the shower door. And the next thing I know, I'm standing in the midst of blood and broken glass.
Welcome to Bipolar She. I'm your host, Janine Noel. Bipolar She is a storytelling podcast about living with mental illness. The content of the show may include stories of suicidal ideation and suicide. At the show's website, bipolarshe.com, I've listed ways to find support. If you ever need immediate help, please dial 988, a suicide and crisis lifeline. I believe in the healing power of writing and speaking about our darkest of days in raw detail. So let's go. Today I'm with JD. He may sound familiar to you because he graciously interviewed me and also did a little bit of music for the podcast.
Hi.
Welcome, JD. All right, so let's jump in here. Take me back to a first.
Well, I have to go further back than the first I was thinking of sharing with you because my issue is depression, really. And that started right around the time I was 16 or 17. And I was kind of a happy guy up until then and a bit of a troublemaker in high school. And like my clique was the guys who wore like big army jackets and like smoked weed and like wrote graffiti and kind of troublemakers. I mean, I was a pretty bright kid and I got good grades, but like I don't know, I was mischievous and fairly happy. And then when I was around 16, I had my first serious girlfriend, and she kind of turned me into a prep a little bit. Like she sort of dressed me in like khakis and like loafers and stuff, and I started exercising. And I became a little compulsive about exercising, and like all my army jacket friends were like, dude, what happened to you, man? She did this to you. But what was happening was also my personality was kind of changing and forming, and I was discovering certain limitations and thinking about the future, like what would my future look like? And I'd never done that before. So a certain darkness began to creep into my personality. And then I became a professional actor after that. And I grew up in New York City, in Manhattan, and the child of two artists. So my mother was a dancer, a modern dancer, and then later became a writer. And my father is a well-known Broadway actor who had and continues to have a terrific career in the theater and also in television. So that combination sort of made it inevitable for me to become an actor, but it also created some expectations for me that I would also become a big Broadway star like my father. And for a while there, I was on my way, really, in New York, working in like independent films and then doing off-Broadway plays one after the next. I didn't go to college and actually made it to Broadway, having, a lot of success in New York theater. When things began to go south, it was when I moved to Los Angeles. This was it was in 1989, and I was 23 years old. I was born in 1966. And I suddenly began to really struggle as an actor. The whole climate for actors is different in Los Angeles. It's a lot more about film and television and not so much about theater. There's something called a network audition when you're an actor. When you do a sitcom or something like that or a TV show, you go to audition for the television network, which are like all the executives, right? So that's like the final stage. Like if you can get the network to approve you, you've got the job and like you're going to get paid a lot of money. And it's an amazing success. So it was basically down to me and this one other guy for this sitcom. I remember it was called Social Studies. So I go into the room to audition. I'm first, and the other guy's second. And I do my little thing, my acting, and, there's like 20 people in the room. I mean, it's a really high-pressure situation. And they laugh, but I don't know, it doesn't seem like as great as I thought it would be. I go out into the hall, right? And then I find myself standing by this door, and on the other side of the door, I hear the other guy auditioning, and they're laughing a lot. And I'm like, wow, he's doing really well. So then I hear he's left the room, and I hear them say, that first guy, man, what was he doing? I mean, get on with it. And they make you wait after this, to tell you like whether you can go home or whatever. So I'm sitting next to him, and he says to me, so how did you do? And I said, not as well as you. And he got the part. So that night, I remember being in the shower after this audition and after this terrible loss that I had experienced. And at the same time, being a 23-year-old man, I happened to be starting to lose my hair. And this was a terrible obsession in my life. And it was, maybe for some men, it's not a big deal. But for me, it was the loss of my youth. It was the loss of my beauty. My dad had a lot of hair. Why was I losing my hair? And I was in the shower and soaping up my scalp, and every time I looked down at my hand, I saw more hairs in the soap. And suddenly my hand lashed out and hit the shower door. And it was one of those like really thick old shower doors, like 1/4-inch glass. And the next thing I know, I'm standing in the midst of blood and broken glass. And I'm looking at my wrist and my hand, and these little holes are in my hand spouting out blood. And and then I don't quite remember what happened next, but I know that I wrapped a towel around my fist and tried to hold it up, and the towel turned red with all the blood. And then at this point, my girlfriend, I went outside. I didn't know whether I should call the police or, get to the hospital. I couldn't drive, so she pulls up, I remember, and she's walking up the steps toward me, and I'm holding up this bloody hand. And she said, what did you do now? So I had to get stitched up, and it was actually quite a painful recovery. There was a hematoma, and I couldn't play guitar for a long time. It really hurt to shake anybody's hand, But at that point, I started therapy, and I also started meds. And there was some improvement in my situation. I will say for me, I think I was really in a clinical depression because I was at the point in my life where I was spending a lot of time in bed and spending a lot of time thinking about death, wanting to be dead, and not eating well. Like my favorite meal was cup of noodles with crackers and peanut butter. I just wasn't taking good care of myself. The medication definitely helped lift some of the depression, and also having my therapist helped. And this was my first therapist, and I found someone who was kind of a wizard in a way. Like I said to him very early on, I was like, I need to know that you're a black belt and that you can handle anything I throw at you. And he's like, I am, and you can trust me. And I did okay with Michael for a long time. And as time went on in Los Angeles, I began to work more in the theater, ironically. I did do my fair share of film and television, but I did more theater and started to make a name for myself as a stage actor in Los Angeles and start to kind of straighten out my life a little bit, kind of learn how to take care of myself. Unfortunately, Michael passed away in 2006. And then for a while, I tried to go without therapy, but that wasn't working out so well. So I got another therapist. And I would say that I was in a dysthymia, which, anybody who suffers from depression kind of knows that that's like a low-grade depression that really can persist for many years. I know in my case it did. So continued to do a lot of theater, continued to be a depressed guy, continued to be medicated. I learned something else about my depression. I realized that I have what's called treatment-resistant depression, which means I build up a tolerance to antidepressants. So I started on Prozac, but then it stopped working really for me. So it's okay, I switched to Paxil, but then we would just raise the dosage until it was I don't know, I'm still really depressed. Okay, well, let's try Zoloft. Yeah, Zoloft worked for a while and then it didn't work. And then okay, let's try Effexor. Effexor happens to be a very powerful med. And Effexor worked, but then I had to take more and more. And the side effects were getting like, I was putting on weight. I had absolutely no sex drive. I felt kind of foggy. And so I had to stop that one and then start, Cymbalta. And I mean, like it was like a merry-go-round of all the different meds. And then I started also taking supportive medications. So you would describe it as like putting a floor under the other medication to support it, to make sure I don't go too low. And that worked for a time.
So, JD,
Yes.
Who was managing your medication at this point?
I switched to Bill William, and he was a MD, and I liked him a lot. He was willing to like work with me to try all kinds of different ones because I've always been like kind of, well, maybe a little adventurous with meds. Like, all right, hey, let's try this or let's push the dosage up, And after that, I now have, unfortunately, Bill had to retire. And so now I'm in the system where I use these services where they have a whole bunch of doctors under this umbrella of an organization. The good thing is that my treatment-resistant depression actually kind of stabilized, and I've been on this cocktail of 2 medications. I think it's hard to remember, Cymbalta and Lamictal, and those 2 have been working for me for like 5 years. So I think I'm going to stay with that. I'm probably going to be on that for the rest of my life or something like that. And I've come to terms with that. I'm fine with it. But there's the depression that comes from your biology, and then there's also the depression that comes from circumstances in your life. And, no amount of medication can really handle that. And unfortunately, as I kind of passed my 50th birthday, I started to become pretty bitter about being an actor and realizing that I was kind of sick of the business and sick of feeling like I had not achieved my dreams, and also realizing like that I couldn't really eclipse my father as an actor. And a big part of that has to do with just, the world changed a lot. I mean, we had the internet and then we had, streaming shows, and it's just a different pathway. Being a Broadway actor is kind of an artifact of an earlier time. Anyway, so going through, you could call it a midlife crisis. Unfortunately, my girlfriend at the time was a heavy pot smoker. And being the adventurous sort of guy that I am, I started smoking with her. And I loved it. I really, really loved cannabis. And I was into edibles a lot because edibles, as most, pot people know, are even stronger than when smoking. Like the effect lasts a lot longer. It's more of a body high. You're just, what can I say? It's just more potent. Well, continuing, I broke up with this person, but I did not break up with cannabis. I even told Bill, my medicator at the time, that, hey, I've been experimenting with cannabis. I kind of downplayed it. And he was like, that's fine. He's like, hey, if it makes you feel good, that's fine. I mean, I understand. Like he wasn't objecting to that.
Was he a psychiatrist?
He was a psychiatrist, yeah. In fact, had that Yale degree on his wall. And, he was a very bright man. I think perhaps he was from an earlier time, maybe he had gone to school in the 70s. And so he had a more permissive attitude about marijuana. And again, I think I downplayed the extent to which I was using it, because it got to the point where I was getting high. I mean, this is the negotiation I start with myself. I'm like, okay, I'm only going to get high on weekends. Well, okay, I'm only going to get high after 6 p.m. That's 6 p.m. is the rule. Then I'm like, find myself looking at the clock, and I'd be like, well, it's 5 p.m. I mean, it's getting dark outside. I don't have anything to do. All right, I'm gonna get high. And it was great. And then I remember getting high in the morning, like taking a bong hit in the morning, and it was bliss for me. And, what's really going on is this is a dopamine rush. This is a feeling of joy that I had never experienced, or yeah, probably never in my life. I mean, maybe when I was much younger, I just felt my imagination was unleashed. And as a guitarist, I felt like I was hearing music in such a rich way. And I have a tendency to want more and more and more. And I was not the kind of user that could just, take a couple of tokes and like kick back. I was like, no, I want to get really high. I want to have an experience every time. I want to go to the edge. Well, what started happening is like I was getting to the edge of psychosis. I was starting to have conversations with other characters in myself. Being an actor, I kind of do accents. So like I had like a British guy, I had a New York guy, I had I don't know, Southern guy, and like we would all kind of have literally out loud conversations. And I remember thinking like, wow, I'm my own best friend. I don't need anybody. This is such a blast. Oh, and also just to add to the mix of the psychosis, like I would begin to convince myself that like I was in love with certain people, or they were perhaps in love with me. So I would find myself texting and, doing behavior that just later, when I would wake up the next day and go, oh my God, what did I do last night? Or what did I say last night? And it was really a social problem for me.
Well, was anyone in your life witnessing this?
I tried to shield it as much from people as possible. But when I talked to my friends on the phone, I would often hear like, are you high right now? And I felt really ashamed that like they could tell that I was high. My parents kind of knew about it. I didn't talk to them very much. My parents are quite elderly, so I was just sort of leaving them alone to their lives. Well, to be honest, like they haven't been particularly interested in my life, so I am not so connected to their lives. And the psychosis kind of got worse and worse and worse. And, oh yeah, you asked me about the medication. So at one point I thought, well, I'm medicating myself with weed, so why don't I just stop taking my meds? Well, as anybody who takes SSRI meds, antidepressants, knows, you can't just quit them. These are strong meds, and if you stop cold turkey, you're going to have serious problems. And I started getting these major brain zaps, which are like lightning bolts of electricity that just go through your head and sort of make your ears ring, and then having trouble walking and feeling just like I cannot function without these meds. So I went back and started taking my meds again. So now I'm getting high all the time, but I'm also taking these meds. And then I also bump up against this thing called tolerance, which with weed is, it happens. You need more and more and more, and the high gets less and less and less. And this is why like drugs are not the answer to your life. And I was, I had like pot paraphernalia all over my house, and these pipes and bongs and vapes. And then I had like my fridge was stuffed with all these meds. Sorry, not meds, all these edibles, the gummy bears, the brownies, the chocolate bars, and getting more and more every day. And it was starting to affect my health. I was coughing. I was kind of sleeping more and more throughout the day. I was basically designing my life also around getting high. So like if someone was like, hey, do you want to go out to lunch? And I would think, well, okay, yeah, how high can I get? Because I have to drive, so I can take an edible at this time, and then maybe I can, then have the lunch, but then take an edible right at the end of the lunch, or maybe in the middle of the lunch, I can have another edible. I can just run off to the bathroom. It was kind of concealing all of this behavior. Yeah, you look like you want to ask me a question.
Well, it sounds like an addiction.
It was an addiction. And it's marijuana dependency, and just some people have it. And it was more powerful than me. It's the only thing I've encountered in my life that's stronger than me. Like with alcohol, I can take it or leave it. If I never have to drink again, it's fine. But I tried quitting weed like 5 times. I would pack everything up into a garbage bag, pour bleach over it, and throw it out. And then after a couple of weeks, the negotiation would start. Like, I'll get high on weekends. That's all. Only after 6 o'clock. The same negotiation. And then as soon as I took that hit again, I was like at the dispensary. I was buying all of the paraphernalia, the grinders, the whatever, the pipes, and it would start up again. So, okay, I'm getting to the low. In the midst of all this, now COVID is coming. And we are isolated in our houses. For me, I was like, hey, life is not that much different for me because I'm isolated all the time anyway, and I'm just getting high. But I was involved in a class on Zoom, and I found myself having a fixation on someone in that class. And I stared at her and began to think that I was in love with her. I developed an infatuation. There's also another word called limerence, which is an interesting phenomenon that's kind of new to psychology, which is this, profound infatuation that's totally unrealistic and all-encompassing. And that's what it felt like. And I wanted her to, I wanted the feelings reciprocated so badly. And in a strange way, like I felt like she was my last shot at finding true love. Being in my 50s, I was like, oh my gosh, she's this like beautiful woman who's just a few years younger than me. And like, oh, she's perfect for me. And she's everything I ever wanted. She's my princess. And I'm going to win her. And like, I even started like buying her stuff. And, she was grateful for that. And she was very nice. But finally, when I sort of made my play for her, she made it very clear to me that like we were just friends. That was, you can call it a narcissistic wound. It was terrible for me. It was, like lying on the floor, crying, screaming, not being able to get through 1 minute without thinking about this person, literally all night long, waiting for her text, thinking that she's just playing a game and that she's going to text me because she feels the same way. And it was agony. And I remember screaming in my own house that I'm ugly and that I hate myself and that I'm a loser and why doesn't she like me and nobody loves me, nobody. And it was it was kind of appalling because at one point I went down to my garage I hang out sometimes in my little garage and play guitar. And my neighbor walks by the garage. And I'm like, hey, buddy, what's up? And he says, hey. And he looks at me with this funny look and he's like, how are you doing? And I'm like, I'm fine. And then I go back upstairs and I realize all the windows in my house are open and he's heard everything. Probably the whole neighborhood has heard these like primal horrible screams and things that I've said about myself. So I began thinking about ending my life. I could not find a reason to go on. So I'm a practical-minded person. And I have some money in my life. I've made some investments. And so I decided to make a list of who I could give some of the assets to. I have an ex-wife. I wanted to give her a certain amount of money. I have a friend who I was going to give some money. And like I kind of went down the list. And then I reached a problem, which was my cat. What am I going to do about my cat, Dodie? Because it's one thing to kill yourself. It's very sad to kill yourself. But if you abandon a cat, people will hate you. It's just the way it is. We feel much more moved by animals than we are by people, probably because we are people.
So at this point, were you dialed in with a psychiatrist and therapist?
No. My psychiatrist, again, was just the once every 3 months medicator guy, and he would ask me how I'm doing. He was this Russian guy. So tell me, how are you doing? How are the thoughts going? And I would say, oh, I'm fine. I'm great. Yeah. Okay, well, that's okay then. And he would just renew my meds. I kept it from him. I kept it pretty much from everybody, except the people who heard me screaming in the neighborhood.
And you're still using marijuana at this point?
Yeah, I'm still using marijuana. I'm still high all the time. Like literally from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. And now I'm making a plan. And now I'm worrying about my cat. And so I decide to leave some instructions because I think, well, when are they going to find my body? Because I don't really see people and it's COVID. I mean, I might end up lying there for, 2 weeks decomposing. And my cat is not going to be taken care of. And by the way, I don't know if it's a myth. It's probably not a myth, but it's possible that your cat will start eating you if it doesn't have food. It needs to have meat. They're obligate carnivores. I'm sorry if I'm being gross, but so I thought, all right, I need to lock myself. My plan was to go down to the garage and turn my car on, and see if I could kill myself that way, through asphyxiation. And if not, then I would try another way, like taking everything in the medicine cabinet. I didn't want to do anything violent. I wanted to just, disappear. And then I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll take like a big bag of the cat food and I'll just slice it open and just leave it there, and leave bowls of water around and stuff. And then I will leave a check for $10,000 on the counter, and it will be meant for a particular friend of mine who I happens to know who loves animals. And I'm sorry that I'm doing this to you, but here's $10,000, and I want you to take care of Dodie, and make sure he has a good life. And I was making all these plans, and I guess the turning point was when I went down to the garage and I turned on the car, kind of like rehearsing for the suicide. I wasn't sure whether I was going to do it because I hadn't done all the cat food and all that stuff. I just went down there to see what it felt like, to see if I could feel like it was going to knock me out. And I turned on that car, and the garage began to fill up with that smell. And then in the middle of that, I went, whoa, this is serious. Like, my life, I'm going to stop living. This is going to be the end of me. And at that point, luckily, I stopped, and I happened to have a neighbor who is a psychologist. And I didn't think that she would be a good therapist for me, but she's an experienced psychologist and educator, and she started an education program at a college, a psychology department. And I wrote to her and I said, I think I need some help. Can you recommend somebody? And she recommended a female therapist. I'd never had a female therapist before. And I said, okay, I'll try this. And that's when I tried my therapist, who is now my therapist, and I believe will be my therapist for the rest of my life, because it's an extraordinary relationship. And she helped talk me out of this, talk me out of this obsession for this woman as I began to understand where that pain was coming from and why I was experiencing that pain. And then I completely stopped the marijuana, and I threw everything out, and I realized I cannot beat this. I cannot be a recreational pot smoker. It's just not meant to be for me. And I slowly began to crawl out of it, and so I guess that brings us now to the present, where like I'm taking my meds, and I see my therapist twice a week. And we have an amazing relationship. I can really share what's going on with me on the deepest level. I've shared like a lot of dark stuff with her, and she is also a black belt, even beyond a black belt. She's a genius to me and can handle anything I throw at her. And so I've exposed myself in ways that are so liberating and empowering, and also self-accepting. And life has gotten a lot better. I'm not so attached to whether or not I get acting work. I guess you could say, and I'm gonna use a profanity, but like I'm at the point of my life where it's like, fuck it, I don't care. I just want to have a good life now. And I do plays, and I don't get paid much money. I don't care. I'm just trying to design a good life for myself and for Dodie. And it continues to get better, and I'm so glad not to be caught in that cycle anymore. And meanwhile, I recovered from my obsession over this person, and there was a time when I thought I could never even mention her name. I couldn't even think about her. But in fact, there was another session of the class, and she was in it and I was in it at the same time. And I was able to just see her as a person and think, oh, yeah, she's not really right for me. And I saw, like, wow, she's beautiful. Of course, she's a beautiful creature and she's got a great sense of humor and all that. But I thought, yeah, but she's not right for me and she's not into me. And that's fine. So that's where I am at this point in my life. I'm about to turn 58. You know, I didn't think it would turn out like this, but I'm glad not to be out of control.
It sounds like you have really good support. You get to see a therapist twice a week.
Yeah.
Is that all out of pocket?
Yeah. My family has been more than supportive. I'm at a point in my life where I have to think about, like, okay, I'm comfortable. And the therapy is one of the most valuable aspects of my life. It helps me so much. And, people, I think, sometimes have this misapprehension that therapy is for when you're miserable, and when you're struggling and suffering. But no, it's for every time in your life, because you're going through stages all the time. You're going through experiences. And even, the good times have their challenges in them. And maybe I might fall in love with somebody, and as exciting as that could be, it also will be worth talking about with a therapist so that I can look at things realistically, so that I can have a certain neutrality and balance about what's happening in my life. It's a lifetime process. I have no intention of ever stopping.
You're obviously a storyteller. And
yes, you didn't have to ask many questions, did you?
This story came through you fiercely. I'm curious how that felt.
To talk about it?
Today.
Well, I like talking about it. I want people to be inspired. I want them to be interested. I want them to recognize themselves in it. In my writing, and I've shared my writing with you, I can talk about some pretty deep stuff and some pretty dark stuff. I think we all have darkness in us. We all have these shadow parts of ourselves. That's really a better term for it, the shadow side. And I have spent a lot of time in that shadow in my life and explored that region. And I've come to appreciate that there is a value in it, because you can share it with other people and make them feel like, oh, wow, I feel the same way too sometimes. And it's okay. It's just being human. And also, you're my buddy, so I enjoy just spending the time with you and chatting with you.
Well, I appreciate you coming out to do this.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.